And there's all these people who were there that we can corroborate were there, and they're telling us this thing was extraterrestrial. It was an alien spacecraft. With Del Rio, we've got one guy, and his credentials do not check out. So what conclusions can we draw from that? You know, the Roswell case, well, we've got some very good eyewitness testimony from guys who were there, who were clearly there, and they corroborate one another. In the Del Rio case, we've got one guy, and he's not who he said he was.
Yeah, I guess I would kind of chuck it out. And I think that's hard. I mean, especially with a crash site, I mean, it's going to involve more than one person doing something with this thing that landed.
And when we look at some of the good cases, Roswell, of course, being one of them, Shag Harbor in Canada, which took place in October of 1967, things seemed to fall into water. Again, you've got multiple witnesses who are still alive and who can talk about it. There were 6 divers who were sent down to see if they could find the thing underwater. Two of them were interviewed by Chris Stiles and Don Ledger. And so we've got that testimony. There's documentation, and in that respect, I think Kecksburg is better than Roswell because there's a lot more documentation, Canadian government documents, legitimate documents that have been found by Ledgers and Stile that lead us to this conclusion. But when we look at the Del Rio case, we got one guy and no documentation at all. The only thing we have is a paragraph in a document, the Eisenhower briefing document, which itself is questioned by the majority of UFO researchers. So it's just not a good case. But there are other cases when you investigate, you've got multiple witnesses, you've got documentation, you've got all this other stuff going for it. So, you know, we need to eliminate the cases like Del Rio that take us nowhere and probably leave us in the desert by ourselves to the cases that can really lead us to an ultimate solution.
And not have that say, oh, well, then everything must be fake or everything must be a hoax.
And the thing that's interesting, and the skeptical community really doesn't give us credit for that. An awful lot of the cases that are solved, an awful lot of the witnesses who are exposed are done by researchers inside the UFO community. The skeptics, of course, will glom onto that stuff and say, well, this guy was proven to be a liar. But they didn't do it. We did it. And the best case that I can think of is Frank Kaufman, who was a Roswell witness for a while, told a marvelous story, but when we had an opportunity to, again, check his credentials against what he was saying, they didn't pan out. And so the only conclusion we can draw is that Frank Kaufman was an opportunist who just placed himself in the Roswell case. He clearly was in Roswell in 1947. In fact, the yearbook that Walter Hott produced for 1947 has the picture of Kaufman getting a medal from, I think it's Payne Jennings, who was one of the top commanders at the base executive officer or the deputy commander. He was in one of the top 3 slots, giving Kaufman a medal. So clearly he was there in 1947. I believe the medal, and it's a black and white picture, so it's hard to tell, but I believe the medal is like a World War II victory medal, which makes no sense. Why would they present that? I mean, everybody who served in World War II got the World War II victory medal. But so Kaufman was clearly there, but when we were able to get his documentation and check his credentials, they did not pan out. So it was we inside the UFO community, and I say we, I really should give the credit to Mark Rodiger, the scientific director at the center, and Don Schmidt, and I think Mark Chesney was there, who's also with the Center for UFO Studies. They were the ones that found the documentation that proved that Kaufman was not telling us the truth. So the skeptical community will say, well, we knew all along that Kaufman was lying, but the reason they knew it is because they don't believe there are any crashes, and anybody who says there is one must be lying. And we were the ones that proved it. You know, we were looking for the evidence. They didn't bother to look for the evidence. They just wrote the case off and wrote the witnesses off. We looked for the evidence, and then when we found it, we exposed the evidence. And that's the thing that really annoys me is if you go through my books, I try to present all the information, and I see the skeptics and the debunkers lifting bits and pieces out of the books to debunk the stuff, but the only reason they know that stuff is because I published it. I let people know everything that was going on in this case, and they wouldn't have known it because they didn't talk to the witnesses, they didn't go to the sites, they didn't look through any of the archives. They just know that there can be no UFO crashes. Therefore, anybody who says something like that must be lying. Any documents that suggest something like that must be forgeries.
And that was one of the things I appreciated about your book, is that it is just really straightforward, and you present everything and not try. It didn't give me the impression that you were trying to sway it in any one way or the other. It was kind of like, here's what I know, here's the information that I have. You can make your own decision based on that.
And to be fair, I mean, this is the path I try for, but clearly my bias is going to show up in the book. I mean, I believe Roswell was extraterrestrial, so you're going to, it's going to kind of lean that way because that's what I think is the truth. And if I think the truth is something else, it's going to kind of lean that way as well. But here's the information I have, and here is why I believe these things. Mm-hmm. It's not that, well, there can be no UFO visitation, therefore there can be no crashes, therefore anything that says there are must be wrong. It's the evidence suggests this. I mean, if you take a look at the Roswell case, the government, the Air Force, and the skeptical community says, well, it was a Project Mogul balloon. Mogul was a highly classified project in the 1947, and that was why nobody knew what was going on. But when you do the research again, you find out that the Project Mogul name, which one of the skeptic big ideas was that Project Mogul was so secret, even the guys working on the project didn't know the name. But if you look at the material published by the Air Force, they have Dr. Crary's diary, and Dr. Crary was the head of Project Mogul in New Mexico in 1947, and you see entries in the diary, clever things like, well, the Mogul equipment arrived today. Clearly he knew the name, and he's putting the name in an unclassified document, and therefore the name isn't classified, and the guys actually knew it. The other thing they say, well, it was just so secret nobody knew about it, except pictures of the Mogul stuff appeared in the newspapers 2 days after the announcement that they had the Roswell thing. There is, the guys from Mogul had actually gone to Roswell to get the assistance of the Air Force there, actually the Army Air Force, there in tracking their balloon arrays. So the guys at Roswell knew what was going on. They were required to publish a NOTAM. A NOTAM is a notice to airmen that the FAA required. Then it was, I think, the CAA saying that we're launching these big balloon arrays because they would be a hazard to aerial navigation. In other words, there was nothing that secret about Mogul except the ultimate purpose. And the ultimate purpose was to spy on the Soviets. They were doing balloon launches in an attempt to keep a balloon at a certain altitude for a long period of time, which is a very, very difficult task to do if it's a free-floating balloon, to keep it at a certain level. And they believe there was this acoustical level around the Earth in the atmosphere like there is in the ocean. If you hit that acoustical level in the ocean, sound travels like hundreds of miles. And they were looking for that acoustical level and wanted to keep a balloon up there with microphones on it, so if the Soviets had detonated an atomic bomb, they would hear the blast in essence. So
it wasn't to like take pictures. I mean, I always wondered. Okay, so they launch off these balloons, and then they think, like by sending out really good intention, they're going to fly over Russia, and it never really made sense. But I guess if it was acoustic, it would make more sense.
They wanted to keep them up at 80,000 feet or somewhere in that vicinity. And they didn't even have to overfly the Soviet Union, but I think the purpose was to do so. And of course, that spy planes negated that, because the spy plane is much better than a balloon, and the spy satellites negated a lot of that other stuff as well. So Mogul itself just wasn't that important.
Kevin, there's the music, which means we need to take a quick break. I'm Dr. Rita Louise. We're talking to Kevin Randle about his new book, Crash, When UFOs Fall from the Sky. We'll be back with the Mind Yoga question after these words from our sponsors.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.